I like how I described it as drowning in arcs. It's literally 4 books. I'm just bad at time management. Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. My name is Evelyn and I'm kind of drowning in arcs. Or I have been. One of my favorite parts of being an online book reviewing human being is being able to help promote books before they release, whether that just be talking about books that I'm anticipating or getting advanced reader copies and being able to tell you with certainty before the book releases, yes, this book is good and you should have it on your radar. The thing is, I haven't actually been doing a great job at doing that thing. Like, some of my favorite books that I've ever read, I've received as ARCs and it's been amazing, but just consistently I don't feel like I've been doing enough to promote every ARC that I read and like. Like, in the past I've tweeted about them on release day and I've like reviewed them on NetGalley and Goodreads, and the thing is, I have this platform and I should be more proactive about telling you about specific titles coming up that I think you'll like. I mean, I'm assuming that that's why I'm getting the ARCs in the first place, is my audience, all 140 something of you, so might as well tell you about them. So today I have for you 4 upcoming releases, one for each of the next 4 months that I have already read and loved and think you will too. So first up we have Lost in the Neverwoods by Aiden Thomas, which is set to release tomorrow on March 23rd. This is a modern day Peter and Wendy Peter Pan retelling that focuses on Wendy, who's my favorite. 5 years ago, Wendy and her 2 younger brothers disappeared into the woods and only Wendy returned, with absolutely no memory of what happened to her while she was gone. Now children have begun disappearing again, which naturally raises some questions about what happened to Wendy's brothers all those years ago. Attempting to flee the past she's been trying not to think about, Wendy accidentally runs over a boy in the street who turns out to be Peter, who she thought only existed in the stories she used to tell her younger brothers at bedtime. Peter claims that in order to save, according to Peter, the only way for them to save the missing children is to face up against his shadow, which will require Wendy to face up against what happened to her and her brothers 5 years ago. So for those of you who don't know, I absolutely love the world of Peter Pan. Any Neverland adjacent story, I am there for it. And I recently reread Peter and Wendy, which is the novelization of the original story, and just, oh my god, I loved it so much. It's so wonderful, so magical, and I was reminded of how much I've always loved the character of Wendy Darling. Like, Peter Pan's interesting, I'll give him that, but I love Wendy, and she is so important to the, like, central, you know, message of the story, but lots of Peter Pan related media just kind of pushes her to the side in favor of, like, oh, the boy doesn't want to grow up, let's talk about that, versus everything going on with Wendy. And I loved, and so the fact that this story is very focused on Wendy, like, Peter's there and he's important and I love him, but this is Wendy's story, which just made me so excited. I love this take on Wendy, and I love how this story talks about grief, because Peter and Wendy, the original story, J.M. Barrie wrote as a way to kind of deal with his emotions about the fact that his brother had died when they were young. So taking this story and looking at it through a lens of grief and loss, and Wendy trying to deal with survivor's guilt and just the emotions surrounding her brother's disappearance is just so brilliant, first of all, and it's done so well. As a retelling, it's really interesting because it manages to capture, like, everything you would want from a Peter Pan story without just taking all of the original plot points and swapping, like, Edwardian England out for Oregon. The relationship between Peter and Wendy is so sweet and adorable, but also tragic. It's this, like, second chance romance thing, and Aiden Thomas is so good at making me root for relationships where there are so many obstacles in the way of the 2 characters being together. I honestly cannot recommend this book enough. It is just such a beautiful, wonderful story that I love just as much as I love Cemetery Boys, and I honestly think that I can say Aiden Thomas is now, like, a must-read author for me, which is really great, really cool. I love his work. Next we have Cece Rios in the Desert of Souls by Kaela Rivera, which is set to release on April 13th. Life in the small town of Tierra del Sol can be pretty rough, especially during the Criatura months, when dangerously powerful spirits roam the desert surrounding the town. Cece Rios has been curious about the Criaturas ever since one helped her return back home when she was lost in the desert, and she doesn't think they can actually all be that bad. That is until her older sister Juana is kidnapped by El Sombreron, a Criatura who steals young women from their villages to become his brides. Cece is determined to bring her sister back by traveling to Devil's Alley, the home of the Criatura. But in order to do that, she'll have to become a bruja, which means forging a soul bond with one of the Criatura. Luckily for her, Coyote has always had sort of a soft spot for humans. So this is a middle grade book that I honestly think I would have loved as a middle grader, partially because I absolutely loved reading it as an almost 20-year-old woman, specifically because it's set in this fantasy world that draws inspiration very heavily from Mexican folklore as well as some other like Latinx folklore, specifically the creation myth as well as the different criaturas. As a kid, I did not have a lot of ways to connect to my Mexican heritage outside of like family dinners, so I would have been stoked to see a book inspired by Mexican culture to begin with, and I think Cece is just such a wonderful, relatable character. She feels like an outsider in her community because she's been told that she has a spirit as strong as water, whereas her community is all about fire, fiery spirits. Gotta be fiery and fight the creators and protect your town. And her soul is too soft, she's too forgiving, and that is why she's been weak enough to get involved with creators in the past. She has to learn that fire and water are different but equally strong, just in different ways. I also really loved all the friendships that she makes on her journey. Specifically, her bond with Coyote was just so cute, so adorable. And I loved it even more because she's trying to become a bruja, and these are like very ruthless magic users who often abuse the criaturas whose powers they're kind of relying on. And she goes, no. Listen, I'm gonna do this to save my sister, but I'm not gonna let it like corrupt me, and I'm not gonna let it like change who I am, and I am not the kind of person who abuses other people. I'm the kind of person who makes friends. And that's just so sweet. Next we have Cool for the Summer by Dahlia Adler, which is set to release on May 11th. Throughout her high school career, Lara has been known as that girl who's got a crush on Chase Harding. So at the beginning of their senior year, when he starts high-key flirting with her, she should be like psyched, right? No confliction of feelings at all. He's hot, he's nice, he's a football star, and he's really, really into her. She's basically finally got everything she's ever wanted, so why can't she stop thinking about Jasmine, the girl she spent a strangely perfect summer with? And to make things infinitely more complicated, apparently Jasmine goes to their school now, which is something she failed to warn Lara about. So I have been following Dahlia on social media since I was writing reviews for the Barnes & Noble teen blog, and she was an editor there. And so I've been following this book for a hot second, and I was like absolutely blown away when I got approved for an arc. I was just absolutely stoked to read it, and I really, really loved it. So if you couldn't tell from this gorgeous cover, the main character here, Lara, is having some conflicting emotions surrounding her possible bisexuality. It's not something she's ever really questioned before until she spends the summer with Jasmine and starts having some feelings for her. So the fun thing that I wasn't aware of about this book is that it's told in two separate timelines. So you get the school year timeline and the summer timeline. So as Lara is actively like worrying about this Chase versus Jasmine choice that she might have to make, you're seeing the summer as she's like falling for Jasmine, and it's really cool. I really love dual timeline stories, and I didn't know this was going to be one, so that was a really nice surprise. I really liked how this book dealt with Lara's coming out to herself specifically. She's someone who has never really had strong feelings for a girl before, and so doesn't really know how to deal with her feelings for Jasmine because she definitely has feelings for guys, and oftentimes in, like, queer narratives, it's like, oh, I've always known ever since I was a little child, and, like, that is just not the case. Like, until my friends started coming out, I didn't question my own sexuality at all, and I probably would not have, because there is not a lot of bisexual representation in mainstream media. Oftentimes kids don't even know it's an option, and if they do know it's an option, it's still kind of difficult to be like, okay, well, attraction to the opposite gender, that's a thing that I've got. And unless, like, you're forced to think about the other aspects of your attraction, like, it would be very, very easy to just not. And so Lara's dealing with, for the first time, being forced to think about her attraction to women because, oh, look at that, attractive woman that I have feelings for. That's just a really fun thing to read about for me, somebody who's been through that already. I felt very seen, and it's really amazing to think about the fact that teens are now going to have this book and, you know, some of my other favorite books that have to deal with bisexuality, and those are going to be their catalyst. Those are going to be the things that make them be like, oh, you know, I might have this thing, but it's also okay that I have this thing, or possible for me to have this thing. And it's just really amazing, and it's making me emotional. And last but certainly not least, we have Fire with Fire by Destiny Soria, which is set to release on June 8th. Huge, huge shout out to Destiny herself for helping me get this arc. Thank you so much. I loved it so much. Let me tell y'all about it. Okay. Aiden and Dani Rivera were born to be dragon slayers. And while for Aiden, this destiny is something that she's been looking forward to and working hard for her entire life, Dani would much rather focus on being a normal teenager with normal friends and a normal job and a normal life. Which is very, very annoying to Aiden because even though her younger sister doesn't actually care that much about their family legacy, she is the more natural talent. Everything changes when Dani accidentally forges a rare magical soul bond with a dragon named Nox and learns that everything they know about their world isn't necessarily true. Desperate to save her sister from the dragon she thinks is corrupting her mind, Aiden turns to the Sorcerers, the only group who can match the dragons on a magical power level, except they're kind of mysterious and not necessarily trustworthy. Each sister would do anything to help protect the other, but they've been caught up in a centuries-old conflict that neither of them fully understands. Y'all, I am so obsessed with this book. I love dragons. They're my favorite thing in the world, my favorite aspect of any fantasy, and I love how versatile they are. I love all the different takes on them, and this is one of my favorite takes. Probably my favorite part of the entire book is the soul bond between Dani and Nox and the relationship that grows out of it. They've been told that they're mortal enemies, they've grown up, you know, wanting to kill each other, and now their literal souls are bonded and they can hear each other's thoughts and emotions, and oh, it's so good. It's so good. I love reluctant allies to, like, friendship dynamics. I also really loved how much I could relate to both Aiden and Dani, despite the fact that they are constantly on opposing sides of the conflict. Despite the fact that I definitely agreed with Dani more on the whole dragons versus not dragons debate, I think I related to Aiden as a character more. First of all, she struggles with anxiety, which your girl is fucking anxious, and I loved that representation. I just loved her journey with it throughout the story, the conflicted emotions that she has surrounding it. Aiden also briefly addresses feeling disconnected from their Mexican culture. Specifically, she feels like she's more connected to Dragon Slayer culture than she is to Mexican culture, which is something I can definitely relate to. Not that I'm a Dragon Slayer, but just feeling disconnected from Mexican culture because my family has not made keeping those ties intact a priority. The extra cool thing about that is apparently their family is from Jalisco, which is the same state in Mexico that my great-grandfather immigrated from. So that was just really personally cool for me. I was relating to her specific, like, emotions about the whole situation, and then she was like, we're from here. And I was like, ah, same. But I also relate to Dani in the fact that I am so bad at Spanish still. Like, just so bad at Spanish. And of course, Danny is bisexual, and y'all know how I feel about bisexual representation, especially in fantasy. This is set in a contemporary fantasy world that's very similar to ours, aside from the fact that there's sorcerers and dragons running around and fighting each other. And so the cool thing is, because it is set in a world that is so alike to ours, they use the same labels that we would use. Oftentimes with high fantasy, you don't get a character being like, yeah, I'm bisexual. It's just like, well, this guy's hot and this girl's hot. We're not gonna talk about it too much. Like, I can count on one hand the number of fantasy books I've read where the characters use the label bisexual. It's 2, 3 if you count the second book in the same series. So, we love to see it. I'm obsessed with this book and this world, and just like top 5 favorite young adult dragons, honestly, that I've read a lot of young adult dragons. Alright, so there you have it. Those are 4 upcoming releases that I have read and loved, and that I think y'all will love if you read them too. If you like this video and you want to see more from my channel, remember to click that subscribe button. With that being said, my name is Evelyn. I make new videos every magical Monday, and I'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.